there. If you know Star Wars, you know the rule of two. A master has a Padawan, a Mandalorian has a Grogu, and the Star Wars Archives XXL edition has a 40 edition. It's here. I just got this and I need to open it as soon as possible. I'm going to show you what's inside. So can we cut to me opening it? Because it's, how do I, aha, got it open. All right, so this is the 40 edition and by me. You can see what it looks like. It's like the other one for Star Wars episodes 4 to 6. This is for Star Wars episodes 1 to 3. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to tell you what's inside it, and then I'll go through it more in detail. So let me open it. So this has episodes 1, 2 and 3. So the contents start with an introduction by George Lucas, and then we start with Phantom Menace. There are almost a couple of 100 pages. Keeps going on. Then Attack of the Clones. Then a new couple of 100 pages. Then we get Revenge of the Sith. Then we get to the end. Okay, what I'm going to do is tell you a few things about what's inside and some of the process of making the book. The first thing I want to say is that my very first day at the archives on Skywalker Ranch, they let me look at all the artwork, and it's just amazing. I started off, the very first drawer I opened up, it's full of original artwork by the likes of Eric Tiemens, Ryan Church, Terrell Whitlatch, Doug Chang, Ian McCaig. It was just amazing seeing all the original artwork. Now each of them worked in a slightly different way. So Doug Chang, for example, he would start with black and white line work, sketches. He would put a wash onto them, and he would do each of his designs, try to do 5 a day, like on this Baron droid. This was his very first one, February 23rd, 1995, and when I met Doug in order to talk about this, to interview him about his work, what I did was I actually arranged all the copies that I'd made of all the pieces of artwork. They're all numbered, so I put them in numerical order and we went through them in numerical order so you could see how the different designs developed over periods of time. So what would happen was he would do 5 a day on different subjects, spend a few days, a week doing that, or a few weeks, then see George. George would then make comments, and then Doug would then go back to his original designs and do new sets of designs over and over again. And this is how it continued, and that's how the process evolved, because writing is rewriting, designing is redesigning, and then at a certain point when there were lots of designs and they had a good idea of the locations, the characters, the droids, the creatures, etc., the aliens that are in the film. It's at that point that Doug started to to do concept paintings. These paintings are probably about, there's a whole drawer just full of these paintings. They're amazing. They're about this size, and so essentially in this book, you know, when we've got a double spread like this and got his painting, it's almost the same size as his painting is. Incredibly detailed. So Doug was working in that way. Terrell Whitlatch and Ian McCaig, for example, they worked in a slightly different way. So what they did was they would do pencils on different sized pieces of paper, and then when they had designs that they thought were good, that they wanted to submit, they would then photocopy so that those pencil lines became dark, and then they would paint over them. They would use watercolours or whatever, and then they would use, that's what they would submit to George. And we've got examples of all of these throughout the book. In some cases, Terrell Whitlatch would want to try out different colours for some of the characters, like Jar Jar Binks, or for some of the pod racers, etc. And so what she would do is she would make multiple copies in black and white and then paint them in different colours. And it was great seeing all this in the archives. So I've included as many examples as I can in the book so that you can see the process that was used and the designs. These are great. And so when it came to Ryan Church and Eric Tiemens, they worked in a slightly different way. Eric, because he was mostly looking at the light and the way that the light fell in the environments, he made a lot of sketches of environments and looking at the light patterns on the environments. So it was more almost like an animation where they're doing colour boards to give an idea of how the film will look and feel and progress over a period of time. Ryan Church, he started really, he would do sketches in his notebooks when he met with George, and then he would paint on the computer, and he would make many different versions of these paintings that would be printed out. And what was, a lot of these are lost, a lot of these versions, because, you know, just one or two computer versions are lost. But as I was going through the archive, I would find many different prints of these paintings, so you can actually see the evolution. And in some cases, I would include the prints I found, which were large format like this, that only existed as prints in the book. And some of them, like this double spread here by Eric Tiemens, I mean, this was really big. You know, they only had prints like this size. So what they would do is that for some of the bigger paintings, they would print them out super large and then tape them together so that they could present them to George. So as the design process developed over the 3 movies, it became more and more digital. I mean, part of the story of this book is about digital and how George created the digital cinema that we see today, the modern cinema. So that when we see that, like, this camera here is absorbing all the light turning it into zeros and ones. It can then be transferred, it can be edited, it can be manipulated, and then it can be projected digitally. All of that, all of those processes didn't exist before The Phantom Menace came out. Attack of the Clones was the first major blockbuster to be filmed with a digital camera, and also the process of making the movies became more digital, so that these designs were scanned, the storyboards were scanned, and animatics were made. This is animations of the whole movie. And George actually edited these animatics so that he knew what the movie was going to look like before he filmed the live action. He then filmed live action, edited again, and then knew that he needed to change things, and then he refilmed. So writing is rewriting, editing is re-editing, filming is refilming. So he basically created non-linear filmmaking through these 3 movies. And that whole process is explained in here. Now, to make this book, both books, I had incredible access. Lucasfilm gave me complete access to all the images in the archives, all the artwork, to all the photography in the Presidio, which is housed at the Presidio, all the paperwork in their archives, so all the production documents, which are also included in here, and also to people. I could talk to people and interview them. Also, at the time, there were a lot of production interviews, and I was given complete access to all this material, so that the text in the book is an oral history told by the people who are actually there. But best of all, I got access to George Lucas. George very kindly agreed to be interviewed multiple times for the books, and that was great. As you can imagine, it was an incredible experience. So I would go up to the main house, walk up to the main house. The main house is amazing. It's got original artworks by the likes of Jean Renoir and Norman Rockwell and Parrish and Bellows. It's just incredible, the original artwork. There's actually one little gallery where he has, which is all devoted to film-related things, and in that gallery he has the Keystone Cops. Remember the old silent Keystone Cops? He has all their badges that they wore. He's got a display of those. He's got Charlie Chaplin's hat and cane. He's got Indiana Jones' hat and whip. And he's even got the lightsaber that went up into space. There are many treasures in the main house. So when I went up, to meet George for the first time, I was there promptly, 10 a.m. George was there waiting for me in the lobby, and shook hands, said hello, went upstairs to his office, and you can see that he's got models, he's got toys, he's got artwork, he's got photography. I noticed Eugene Smith, very famous photographer. There was a photo of Charlie Chaplin exhausted, which is very famous, which I featured in the Charlie Chaplin Archives book, and he had like an original print of that there. So we sat down, and the first thing George said was, "I want a conversation." He didn't want a sort of Q&A where I had a list and I could just tick off whatever. He wanted to have a bit of fun. He wanted to engage. and to talk. So this became, if you like, my job to try and keep the conversation going and to keep George interested for as long as possible. I mean, as it happened, I met George 5 times, so there were 5 different days over a period of a couple of years. And, obviously there are moments when there are longers, where there are silences, and, you come to a stop, etc., and you have a sip of tea or coffee or whatever. But I have to say, most of the time it was fantastic, and where we would talk for 3-4 hours non-stop, and there would just be gems coming from George, because George really knows Star Wars. You may think that's a strange thing to say, but he has completely lived it. As a writer, he has thought about every aspect of Star Wars, every environment, every character. In his head, he hasn't just thought about Naboo, he has been to Naboo. And all those doorways and places that are outside Theed, all the places that the Gungans inhabit and travel to, he has thought about them and he's travelled there. He's worked out their technology, their social mores, etc. And that was the great thing about talking to George, in that if I asked him about a specific thing, then I knew George could have an answer for it because he'd already thought about it. So that was great. Now, it's one thing to know a place, and it's one thing to know his story and how his story is constructed, but it's another thing to understand why. And this was the real reason why I wanted to talk to George. I wanted to know why this, why that, why the other. And watching episodes 1, 2 and 3, one of the things I've noticed is that very early on, the word symbiosis comes up. It's actually mentioned twice. Symbiotic relationships. And I asked George about this, and really that unravelled everything about Star Wars episodes 1, 2 and 3. What he was doing was, in the 3 episodes, he's showing in the first episode how symbiotic relationships on Naboo, between the Naboo and the Gungans, work and can be made to work over the course of the movie in order to defeat the villains, and then how those symbiotic relationships outside through the Senate, etc., fall apart. And when there are no symbiotic relationships, when there is no give and take, when there's no compromise, that's the point about where everything falls apart. And of course, in episodes 4, 5 and 6, those symbiotic relationships come together, and that creates the great ending where everybody cooperates and works together in order to defeat the Emperor. So George explains this not only in terms of story and character, but also in terms of the midichlorians and the wills as well. So that's really the subject of many of the conversations that George and I had. And within the book, as you go through the book, those conversations are placed within the text in appropriate moments as the chronology of the making of the movies is told. So the book has three main through lines, three stories that you can follow as you go through the book. The first is the process of making the movies, of writing, directing, etc., editing. The second is the development of digital technologies. And that was great because I got to meet John Knoll and Dennis Murren and Mike Blanchard to talk about that. And then the third is the philosophy behind Star Wars, like symbiotic relationships and cooperation, which I talked to with George. George describes Star Wars as like a giant mandala with all these little wheels and clockwork bits and pieces that fit together, that different parts of Star Wars echo or rhyme, as in poetry. And so what I'm trying to do with the books, both books, is to try and reinterpret the Star Wars in order to give a greater understanding of what makes Star Wars tick. Obviously there are differences between the big XXL version and this 40 edition, so you'll want to know about that. First thing to say is that in the XXL, the first chapter, which is all about the development of digital technology and the special editions, that's been taken out. Secondly, that the number of photographs has been reduced from about 1,200 images to about 500 images in this book. But the text for episodes 1, 2 and 3 has not been changed or cut at all. It's all still here, it's all still intact. This book has everything you need to know about episodes 1, 2 and 3 of Star Wars. It's available now, and I hope that you enjoy it. If you have enjoyed this video, then please leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment and share. Thank you very much.